All right, welcome everyone. Today we have a special treat. We have Lindsay here, who is an RN who used to struggle with anxiety and now is an expert coach for others on how to resolve it in what I would consider a pretty simple, straightforward path that doesn't rely on a bunch of supplements, protocols, complication, overanalyzing. It's pretty just direct and straight to the point. And I've seen her community of about 10,000 people on Instagram, and I don't know how many on TikTok and the other platforms, but you have hundreds, if not thousands, of testimonials that we see coming up on your stories every day of people that are actually practicing and applying what you teach and having some pretty miraculous results in a pretty quick amount of time. I always see people that are like 7 days in and, they're not panicking for the first time, they're sleeping well for the first time. All sorts of really cool testimonials that I see on there. And I just wanted to start by kind of sharing why I'm excited to have this conversation. In the work that I do, we address anxiety and symptoms through a biological and somatic lens. And so I use German New Medicine, which has a perspective that anxiety, it's not just like a vague danger response. It's not just like a vague nervous system response, but it's very specific to a certain part of the brain and certain what they call conflict shocks that can happen that turn it on. It's essentially a moment that goes, okay, this anxiety is useful to get you out of the danger, right? And there's variations of what that can be. And it's a helpful framework. And then generally, where I go with people is into a form of inquiry that maybe is looking for the original moment, the memory, the sort of who they had to become when they were in that trying time. But I noticed that a lot of my clients with anxiety specifically, they would get too caught up in trying to find the magic answer, the silver bullet, or they'd relate to the process of resolving their anxiety in a way that kept signaling to their brain that the anxiety is a problem. And so it seemed like they were getting in their own way, even trying to resolve it. And while that method, it works for a lot of other symptoms and illnesses, I was seeing it sometimes having the opposite effect for anxiety. And so I really appreciate your work and how you demonstrate this non-resistance method alone seems like it can deactivate the anxiety even without conscious memory retrieval, story reconstruction, without getting into all of the dirt. It sounds like you found another path to resolve it. So I'd love to hear more about how you discovered this path, why it works, and why you see this being applicable even without the big stories or anything being found.
Yeah, so let's talk about my story a little bit. So I've always kind of been an anxious person. I don't know that I would have ever owed it to anxiety, like always feeling less than, second guessing myself, always feeling judged by others, like just these things I always owed to being my personality, right? But 4 years ago, I felt my experience was after my daughter, which what I teach here applies to anybody. It is not just for postpartum moms. Postpartum moms are at risk because of hormones and identity changes and lack of sleep. So I fell into the cycle of panic. It was the scariest thing I have ever felt in my entire life. I remember being in my room screaming, calling my mom, like, you have to get here now. Something awful is happening. And it's wild to me as an RN. I had worked for 15 years with people in the mental health space, and no one ever taught me. I worked with multiple mental health gurus. No one ever taught me what I teach in this space, which I'll get into a little bit. So, panic attacks, severe, like this intense doom and gloom feeling, severe intrusive thoughts. Like trigger warning for so many people. I had harm intrusive thoughts towards myself, towards my daughter. I had thoughts of like running away and never looking back. As an RN, it made sense for me to go into my doctor. That's what everyone told me to do. They're like, you need to go into urgent care. And so I did. That was my first initial step, right? I went into urgent care. They put me on Lexapro and then they put me on clonazepam. So they put me on, I think at my worst, I was taking 4 clonazepam a day. And they're like, this will help you. This is going to help you calm your system down. Right. And I vividly, and I share this in a lot of my posts, I vividly remember sitting on my couch in absolute tears with horrific suicidal thoughts with that Klonopin, and that Klonopin was making things so much worse. Therapy she tried EMDR with me. She tried CBT. She tried all these different things, and a lot of it was just talking about it and talking about what was triggering me, why it was happening, and what I know now. I didn't need to really know any of that. I just needed to learn that this was simply just my nervous system being activated and nothing more than that. And what I'll get into, it's actually really quite simple. And I think that bothers a lot of people because there is so much noise in the online space about anxiety, and people will come at me all day, and I get it because people are suffering. But this, I need this lab test and this and this and this. No, those things can all be helpful. You might have high cortisol. You might have low cortisol. Someone said that to me yesterday. I have low cortisol. I meds help me, therapy help me. And I'm like, but do they? So many students come to me and say they have suffered with this for years. And as soon as they learn what I teach in this space, they are doing significantly better. And you're right, as soon as I've literally had students come to me and in 2 weeks, their intrusive thoughts, specifically in their panic, are like 80% reduced. Is wild.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
Because literally, when you feel like you've tried everything, we have to really open ourselves up to the idea that it's in that doing everything, and our body just needs us to slow down and understand what's happening, which I can get into a little bit more.
Mm. Yeah, I just want to reflect back what you said because I think it's so huge. Sometimes the ego thinks that when we have such a complicated problem or one that's taken over so much of our life, it needs a really complex solution, and it can feel almost insulting for there to be an easy answer. It's like, oh, then why did I struggle for so long? Why did I do this or that for so long? It can feel like such a shot to the ego, but generally healing is simple. It's when it's overcomplicated that we get stuck and just going in loops. So I think that's really cool.
And I say that with so much love too. I think one of the biggest things I've seen in the last month specifically is people will, I'll say, give this is the solution, right? People say, but I have this going on and I have this. So it's like this almost thought, which you're right, is very ego driven of like that the situation is unique, right? There's something unique about my situation. And I always say that that's almost anxiety line. That's actually an intrusive thought of trying to really validate your experience and make sense of it. And actually, like a protective factor of, we've got to figure this out. This is unique. There's some specific solution to my specific problem, right?
Mm, yeah, and I'm curious your thoughts on this being an RN, but do you see or do you think that sometimes when people say, "Oh, this medication or this or that, it's helping me," it's because they have something external that they believe is going to support them and help them with the anxiety, but then after a certain point it kind of stops working, and that's why people go on this climb up the medicine ladder of needing more and more stronger doses, always switching it. Curious if you see that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's like core of what I teach, right? You're in this state of panic. You go to these quick tools, whether it's clonazepam or any other benzo. You're going to meditation. You're going to deep breathing. You're going to exercise. You're getting, all your lab work done, and you're like seeking all of this, right? And yes, students will say that to me all the time. It does give me quick relief, even if it's for like 20 minutes and then it comes back. And literally, all that fixing and seeking is creating more tension in your body. And that tension releases more adrenaline, which is all panic is. It's just adrenaline coursing through your body, right? And so when we're fixing and going and going and going, that actually amps it up even more because you're like seeking that quick fix. So it kind of shuts it down. But that's telling your body that there's a threat and this anxiety needs to stay. And so it works, gives you that quick relief, but then it actually comes back tenfold usually because it thinks at a very biological level, anxiety is your nervous system activated, your full fight or flight response. Like it thinks there's a tiger here. And every single time you avoid and fear that, the tiger gets louder. When I say it outright to students, they're always like, this is so simple. I'm like, I know it is. I know it is, but it is the answer every single time. And I will stand by it. I know it's not easy. It is actually the hardest way out because you are sitting in the uncomfortable. But my goal for students and what I see all the time is what I teach about the nervous system and learning that it gives you the confidence to sit in the discomfort, right? And people will say to me, well, I am trying to sit in the discomfort and it's still not going away. Well, that's resistance because you're wanting it to go away. Like time is your biggest friend. How long have you been struggling with anxiety? When we move through it, live our life with the anxiety, as time goes on, your body is going to learn that the anxiety doesn't need to stay, that it's safe for it to go away because right now it thinks it needs to stay, right?
Mm.
And I think too, one of the biggest things I often talk about is so say if someone's been in fight or flight for 8 years, they've been in panic, had panic attack for 8 years, chronic anxiety, they have essentially formed a habit, a subconscious habit of fixing that and seeking quick relief, right? So I am now asking people to develop a whole new habit, and it is a lot like going to the gym. It's uncomfortable. You don't give up just because it's hard, but over time, students will say to me, "Oh, I'm doing this now. I'm going out and living my life without even having to really think about it. It's just becoming more of a habit."
Yeah, very cool. So a lot of people, when they think they're practicing non-resistance or feeling the anxiety, they're oftentimes just feeling the way that they resist or respond to that anxiety, whatever their coping mechanism is. That's what they are sort of practicing and getting stuck in more so than actual non-resistance to it. Is that?
Yes, yes, exactly. Almost like I always use this term like we become addicted to the fixing and the anxiety itself. Like our body becomes addicted to the fix,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense just in my understanding of how the brain and body works. Because if you're going through these intense moments where you think you're in danger and anxiety happens to be present there, and then you remember surviving that danger and there was the anxiety, and that's kind of like your go-to to go back into, it can be kind of addicting. Like, oh, okay, even though I hate this and it feels uncomfortable, it's also really familiar,
Yeah.
and it's how I know how to be. It's in that coping, resisting place with the anxiety.
And it's what we're taught. Like eh, it blows my mind how many students will come to me and say, what you are teaching me here has never been taught by any therapist. And I think it's so, and there's, of course, some therapists that are teaching it, right? But I think we live in like a society that does not like to be uncomfortable. We're taught, like, not that we don't like it, but it's just like what we're taught. Like we've
Mm.
like just white knuckle it and be strong and all of that. And so when we suffer, we think that there's some magical cure outside of us. And what I teach here could shake up everything. And it does shake up everything because I firmly believe that meds and therapy and all the modalities are have their time and place. But in terms of anxiety and panic, you literally have everything at your fingertips. So can we go back to like the science of it a little bit? Because
Yeah,
like
please.
that's the whole point, right? Of kind of what I teach. So we obviously all have a nervous system, right? It's needed in life or death situations. If you were in, you know, my prehistoric times and a tiger was chasing you, you would need that fight or flight response. I was thinking about this the other day. I'm like, oh, our ancestors could really recalibrate really quickly, though, right? So they would be in these life or death situations and then they would recalibrate. And I think over time, we've just adapted and our bodies aren't as able to do that to get back to that baseline. So our nervous systems all have this baseline, right? Where we're in this calm state and blah, 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 blah. And that baseline can be shifted from due to stress, hormones, lack of sleep, childhood traumas, all of that, right? And once we are pushed over that baseline, that's when your nervous system is what we call sensitized or just activated, right? So that's when it creates all of the symptoms of anxiety, intrusive thoughts, panic attacks, wild physical symptoms. The physical symptoms, Brandon, that people experience are crazy and that can be owed to anxiety. They are wild. DPDR, which is dissociation or depersonalization, almost like where you feel out of body, you feel like your life isn't real. There'll be times like you're driving your car and like you feel totally like you're disconnected from your body. Those are all survival responses. Okay. And what's really cool about what I teach is each of those is falls under the anxiety umbrella. Like they don't have a specific treatment for each. They are all the symptoms of an activated nervous system. So, Brandon has talked about like somatics, right? I believe in a lot of breath work to a certain extent, um, but not, we need to learn and understand non-resistance first, which is all about when we don't fight those symptoms, which takes practice, you're building a new habit, that adrenaline in your body is able to burn off over time. That's how the nervous system can calm down. Now, breath work and somatics, I think, can serve a time and place. Um, but it's again in all that doing, if we're using it to push away the anxiety, if we're using it to avoid the discomfort, then it is going to be essentially a quick fix and temporary, give you temporary relief.
Mm. Yeah, it's like releasing the buildup, that tension in the system you were talking about, but without actually showing the brain that there's no longer a danger. So it's not necessarily retraining it and giving you that long-term freedom. It's just kind of, shh, let me
Yeah.
release the pressure.
Yes. And so essentially non-resistance, right, is we're not doing all of those things. We're just living our life carrying the anxiety with us, which people will say is so impossible. It feels so impossible. And of course it does. Like it it does feel impossible in the moment and it's supposed to. Like your anxiety is serving a purpose. It thinks it's needed for your survival. It's just confused, right? Um, One thing you kind of mentioned is like getting into like triggers or certain experiences, right? Which my background in nursing is working with moms and babies, so moms who had significant traumatic childhoods, right? So we would talk a lot about that and really dive into a lot of that. And there's a time and place for that, but when you're in panic, we don't necessarily need to dive into each of those ones. We just need to, this is my nervous system is just activated, right? And of course, we can get into that stuff, once we're in more of a calm state, which I have so much more to say about all of that, even,
Mm,
which I do teach my students. But this is your nervous system and nothing more than that. And your mind will race 100 miles an hour. Nope, it's got to be more than that. It's got to be more than that. There's got to be more doing and fixing and that's there's a purpose behind that. Your body does that to try and make sense. The mind spirals to try and make sense of a body that doesn't feel safe.
mm. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
Can I ask you kind of a selfish question?
go for it.
Selfish for me, because when you were talking about how there's a lot of different symptoms that show up, but they're all sort of related to anxiety. The way you were explaining it, it just really reminds me of I was diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome. And there's a certain histamine threshold that your body gets to, and then you start to have symptoms. Like, for example, if my histamine load is really low, I don't really have a lot of symptoms. But if it starts to build up, build up, build up, then all of a sudden something will happen. And people will get the rashes, they'll get the histamine dump, the like niacin flush in the face, the this, that, or the other. But mast cell, it's kind of a body's response to there's a danger. I can't, I'm not ready for what's coming next, that sort of a thing. So I'm just curious if this would work for something like mast cell symptoms as well.
Absolutely, because what you're kind of saying is, yes, it's the mast cell, but it's literally like the adrenaline, right? The adrenaline surge, and then it like spills over, and that is when the symptoms come on, right? Physical symptoms are really challenging. They, in my years of doing this, I would say that physical symptoms and intrusive thoughts are the hardest part to overcome, but not impossible. I always just want to validate that physical symptoms are super real because students will come to me and say, like, my doctor tells me it's all in my head. Well, they are real, but yes, more often than not, they are when the physical symptoms start, the anxiety and that activation of the nervous system causes us to be so fixated on them. And I'm not saying you're doing this, Brandon, by any means, just what people do, come so fixated on them that the symptoms get louder and more persistent.
Hmm.
So it is essentially our mind, in a way, sometimes can exacerbate the physical symptoms. But I always want to validate that they're so real because they absolutely are. You're feeling.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, it's like they're real, but they're not necessarily true. They can be psychosomatic, and so that's what's turning them on, even though they're there, there's still that connection, is what it sounds like.
There's a little bit of a woo-woo side to me. And I don't I the woo-woo side to me, I teach more with my like private students, not necessarily in just my like digital product. But like our minds are incredibly powerful. So people will always say, but this. And I firmly believe that what we tell our brains will be true for us, right? Do you believe in this, Brandon?
Oh yeah.
And it's hard because like our mind and what happens up here feels so real. And I'm speaking from my experience. I have created a lot of my suffering my whole life based on the things I've told myself, right? And I've never
Mm.
really realized that there's a different way of doing it. Um, but even when we go back to like medications, I always like sit here and contemplate. People, or even me, when I was on the Lexapro, it never really helped me. But people who will say the meds help them, is that because like there's this placebo effect, right? We're told that they're going to help us. We take it. So our brain, I mean, it sounds a little woo-woo, but there's a lot of research behind it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because if you're like just thinking of me, for example, like if I was panicking because I feel like for me, I really only get anxiety about getting anxiety
Yep.
because, and this is kind of a gross share, but for me, it's not a mental thing. It'll be a thing where I'm totally not expecting to get anxiety, even if it's a situation where I normally do. I'll like forget and I'll go there, and then all of a sudden I get what I call panic diarrhea, where I feel it in my stomach, where I'm like, oh
Yep.
crap. And
Yep.
then and then I'm panicking about the fact that if I panic, I'm gonna get diarrhea and that would be really inconvenient right now. And
Yep.
so if somebody gave me a pill and they said, this will make sure you at least don't have diarrhea, then I'd go, oh cool. I wouldn't be worried so much about the panic attack because I'm like, at least I won't have this awkward thing happen and it would make me stop panicking. Yeah.
Yep. And then it just brings like makes my mind so curious as to how the brain works. Is it that the med is actually doing that, or just because we're told the med is doing that, right? Which is a
Yeah.
whole nother topic of conversation.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's like the ibuprofen effect, right? They have no scientific proof that it actually does anything to reduce pain, yet it's the most effective painkiller in the like NSAID market. I always
Yep.
find that one interesting. I think that's the one. Yeah.
It is the one. Yep. Ibuprofen is, yeah. I don't know. Our minds are just so incredibly powerful. I want to go back to what you're saying a little bit though, like how you're anxious about the anxiety. That is so common. People, students will say that to me all the time. Does that even make any sense? They'll say, "Does that make any sense?" It doesn't even make sense. I'm like, "Yeah, it makes absolute sense." This is what everyone who's fallen into the cycle feels. They're anxious about the anxiety or they're panicked about the panic, right? And it can literally trigger in the most mundane moments where you're not even thinking about it, and then it will come to the surface. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And literally what will happen is then your brain will say, why is this even happening right now? I wasn't even anxious. I wasn't even, nope. It's just your nervous system for some reason just is turning on and activating, and we don't need to really know why, right? So what I tell students a lot, like when they're about to panic, it usually always starts in the body, right? Sometimes you can't even tell where it's starting, but like you're saying, it kind of starts as this pit in your stomach, right? Kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of going there, and you've probably tried this and it takes so much practice, but going there and sitting with that sensation and trying to not label it, which is this somatics a little bit. I mean, it kind of is, right?
Yeah.
Try not to label that fear sensation down there, you know, we've labeled it as scary, we've labeled it as uncomfortable. Can we neutralize the label of it? Which sounds really freaking simple when I say it outright, but I get that it's not that simple. But what happens when people are so much in panic too, we don't even necessarily aren't able necessarily to slow down enough to know where it's starting in our body, right? So it'll like start in our body, pit in the stomach, choking sensation, what have you, and then our mind starts to go, and that's because it's like bypassing the body to try and make sense of, and so it goes into the mind, and that's when all the spiral happens. You're saying that doesn't happen a whole lot to you though, the mind.
For me, it doesn't get mental until I feel the diuretic effect in my stomach, and then my mind is like, oh crap, we're gonna embarrass ourselves. We're gonna have this and that happen. Then it starts to perceive all the ways in which this is gonna end horribly. And
Yes.
sometimes it'll just be like I'm in a situation where there's no access to bathrooms, and so my mind will just split second be like, oh, well, that would really suck if you had panic diarrhea in this scene. And I'm like, cool, thanks. Now I will.
Now I will have it, right?
Yeah.
So people like those are how the mind starts to go. That's because that adrenaline. So what I learned, those are intrusive thoughts, right?
Mm,
Technically, those are intrusive
yeah.
thoughts. So when you're panicked, your body just surges with adrenaline. That adrenaline has nowhere to go. So that's when the mind spirals to try and release that adrenaline. And what's so different from what a therapist would probably teach you in that moment is how can I talk myself down? How can I kind of reframe that? How can I assure myself that this isn't going to happen or reassure myself that this isn't going to happen when I'm telling you to do the complete opposite of that? And that is literally just like observing those thoughts and detaching yourself from them, that they are not you, they are just anxiety and your body ridden with adrenaline. Now, I feel like your situation is really unique because of that diarrhea effect. That's like, I can't sit here and say if that was a symptom of mine that I would so easily be able to just detach from my thinking. That's really scary. So, yeah, I
Yeah,
get that.
yeah. That's what makes it kind of a tricky one that for me it's been a hard one to move through because I'm like, yeah, I used to just get general panic attacks and that I was like, ah, okay, whatever. But then one day when I was maybe like 15 or 16, I was going to a job and I think I was afraid of the boss yelling at me or firing me or whatever. And for whatever reason, on the way there, I just got the panic diarrhea and I had to stop and get Imodium and basically drug myself to where I was just so foggy headed, which of course was then the situation where the boss would actually yell at me. And
Yeah,
ever since then, the two were tied together.
that mind body connection, right? So
Yeah.
now it's uh, interrupting that cycle, which a lot of people would say, through meditation, but I think you can interrupt the cycle truly just through what I'm teaching you here, and recognizing it as that adrenaline response. And it's not going to be this like super quick fix, of course. You're going to, which I
Mm,
tell so many students. I'll have students earlier when I said 2 weeks, people will do better in 2 weeks. That's not always the case. Yeah, of course. Some take 4 to 6 months, a year. And I think that's like if anyone who's going to listen to this hears anything from this, it's that we tend to put such a timeline on our healing, and that's resistance. Like, I wish I was better by now. I was doing so well just a couple months ago, and I want to so desperately get back to that place. That's resistance. You're making the anxiety wrong, which we all do. Like none of none of what I'm saying is unique to anybody. We all do that because it's
mm,
uncomfortable and we want
yeah.
to feel better.
Yeah. And that's probably the people that it takes longer to get there since they're still in that resistance.
And I
Yeah.
think personalities contribute, childhood experiences, all that does contribute to, you know, how quickly we recover, not, but it doesn't mean anything about the person, is kind of what I want to
Mm,
really
yeah.
point. It doesn't mean anything about the person.
They probably think they're broken often with
Yes.
anxiety. Something's wrong with them, right? Because a lot of people they get more of the like I'm gonna die, there's something wrong with my system, like people that need to rush to the ER when they get it. That's pretty common, right?
It's so common. People will say to me every day, almost, this can't kill me, right? And
Mm,
can the stress response and stress and cortisol kill us over time? Like maybe as a nurse, I almost have to say yes because it's hard on our heart, but can the actual panic cycle kill you? No. Like if if it could, so many people would be
mm,
dead, right? When you're in that panic cycle, you're getting that like surge of adrenaline when you practice not fighting it, when you don't fight it, it naturally has to go away. Like that's the end result.
yeah.
And then it'll peak again and then you practice non-resistance again and the end result is that it goes away and it'll keep coming back like that and spiking because it naturally
Mm.
falls.
Yeah, that reminded me of another question I really
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, if I can.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a two-part question. One is when you start working with people, whether they download your PDF or whether they're working with you one-on-one, and they start to address this through non-resistance, do they initially get a burst of more anxiety and more opportunities to practice? And the second part is if they have situational anxiety, kind of like me, I only get it if there's no access to a bathroom, which is usually like a plane, a train, or a car that's stuck in rush hour traffic. Is there a way to practice non-resistance before you get to those places if you're not in them all the time, other than saying, let me just go hop on some trains and planes right now?
Okay, I'm going to address your second one first because this is a really great question and not one that I'm often faced with a situational, a specific to planes and bathrooms and all that, right? So this is new what I'm about to say, and I'm really curious as to your thoughts. Have you ever tried to visualize yourself going to those places and like through meditation and see what comes up?
That's a great response. Yeah, I actually have, because somebody else responded that to me too. And I can't elicit the same anxiety with just closing my eyes and visualizing it. And I actually practice visualization a lot, so it's weird that I can't. But what I can do is if I make plans that I know are going to be stuck in rush hour traffic, or like if I plan to have somebody else drive, or even if I book a flight, like the week before it'll hit me. So I have a
Yeah.
little bit of a window beforehand to practice. Like my brain has to believe the visualization is actually happening or going to happen.
Yeah.
So it takes a little bit more for me to get there. But if I like set up with a friend, hey, you're gonna come pick me up, you're gonna drive, and we're gonna try to go skiing. Guaranteed rush hour traffic that I'll be maybe if I actually set the plan, it would give me some practice time.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm thinking. Like, it's not even an essence that you need to expose yourself more. It's just at least having some of those opportunities for exposure.
Hmm.
Makes sense.
Yeah, like more low risk. Like the
Or,
other day, I had my mom drive us to a hike, and no normally I don't think that would even trigger it for me, but I always think that beforehand. But I had just this is maybe a weird story that might be interesting and tie in. I sometimes use peptides, amino acids that are injectable for different things. And I had been moving, and so I hadn't gone to the gym in like 3 months. So I was going to use a peptide that I didn't know boost growth hormone. I had just been searching which ones are good for like getting back in shape. And so I think it went straight to my pituitary gland and boosted the growth hormone, which is not something I could have a conscious thought about. But in my internal system, my autonomic nervous system, it was a pretty distinct shift. And my body goes, oh, there's a big distinct shift here. That's not safe. And I had a histamine breakout, the mast cell thing, that the white in my eyes turned red, my whole face went numb. I like could hardly open my mouth or talk, broke out in like full body hives. So I drove 100 miles an hour to the emergency room, which I never go to. And so anyway, my system was really charged. I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to be anxious about my mom driving right now because
absolutely.
my system just went through that and thought it was going to die." And I was like, if I have panic diarrhea in my mom's car, she'll still accept me and love me and we'll clean it up. And so I was like, so I'm gonna try to practice because I had downloaded your thing. I was like, I'm gonna try to practice non-resistance with my mom if I get diarrhea in the car, oh well.
And that's like the biggest thing, right? And this is a tool that a lot of therapists will teach. And I do like, what's the worst that can happen, right? Because that's what anxiety is. It's worst case scenario thinking.
Hmm.
So you just did that yourself of like, my mom will still love me. My mom will still accept me, right? If you would have been a student of mine in that moment when you were like panicking so hard and you were like, of course I'm going to be in this panic with my mom. I would have wanted you to almost not reframe, but say like that was a huge opportunity for your nervous system to desensitize even more because you were like in this like full blown state. So practicing non-resistance in that moment is one of the best opportunities to actually desensitize and calm down your nervous system even more when it is in the most activated state.
Mm, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Sense. So even like I've never had I shouldn't say I've had students and I know some people in my personal life who have this diarrhea induced by anxiety. Okay. I won't say who since we're on YouTube. But like students who have the intense fear of driving, there's a lot of students who have that, right? We practice, I encourage them to practice just first driving around their block or just a small area and then like these small exposures, right? And we're able to do that when we understand that this is a nervous system response and nothing more. It it takes so much practice, but it is the way every single time. Like even for your situation, I believe it is the way. Of course, there's different tools you can use to support you in it. But yeah.
Mm,
The
yeah.
other question you had asked about, do you kind of said like, do things get worse before they get better? Do people
Mhm.
have a surge of panic? Yes, because when you are practicing non-resistance, you are basically the floodgates are opening. Like you're opening up the floodgates,
Mm,
the emotions spill over, and the panic will often your body is like, no, 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 we need this, we need this. So it'll peak, 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 right? And then it'll fall. And then the more you practice non-resistance, like you'll go longer days of not having panic. And then it can actually get even worse. And that's essentially because the body thinks the body is doing whatever it needs for your survival. So it's going to turn that on even louder because it thinks it's needed.
hmm.
And I'm not going to say
Wow.
anymore because it's really that simple.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And I bet a lot of people that's where they stop and want to
They do.
say, "Oh, this doesn't work. I'm going to turn away." I used to have a client who, whenever he'd get close to a breakthrough, he would get that effect in his life, and he'd go, "No, that must mean whatever we just did together isn't working. I need to regress back to the defended way of being." Whereas since I've been using your course, I've noticed that where I'm like, "Ooh, now I'm having a panic attack because I messaged somebody something and." I'm thinking about they might reject me for having said that the wrong way. I'm like, I wouldn't normally panic about that at all, but all of a sudden now that I'm working on this, I am. And I'm like, great, what a fun opportunity.
It- yes, right there. What a fun opportunity. Like what or fun, I don't know if you said fun, but what an
Yeah.
opportunity, right? It's actually like so you're experiencing symptom shifting, which is really common, right? And that fear was probably always underneath the surface. It's just like now there, right? But you're seeing it as opportunity versus what's wrong with me? Why is this coming up to the surface? Or why would I be feeling this? No, like just see it as an opportunity. So when I was in recovery, I I learned all this from a coach and he's all over YouTube. So I mean, I'll share his name. His name is Sean Kassam. So SHAANKASSAM. Phenomenal. It was so great. I mean, it's what truly saved my life.
Mm,
And when I learned what he was teaching, I basically took that bottle of clonazepam and I put it in like our sheriff's bin, disposable benzo bin, whatever, and never looked back because I was like, I know why this is happening, whatever, right? And within like 2 weeks, I think I was like having some big breakthroughs. It took about 90 days for it to really, the panic to like really calm down the intrusive thoughts. But then I would go like months and do very well. And then bam, it would come back. And my initial thought was always like, what do I need to do to fix this? Like, why am I stressed? Like, why is this happening again? Nope, this is my nervous system, nothing more than that. Like, there's nothing else that needs to be done. And then it would go away. And I think the longest stretch I went was like a year. And then there was like this case of a mom, national news of who did something horrific. And my panic resurfaced and
Mm,
practiced non-resistance for 48 hours and it went away. This was 3 years ago, right? About a month ago, I had a week of kind of intense anxiety that I haven't experienced in 3 years. We had a really tough year, and uh, I fell into it for a couple of days where my brain was like, "Let's do some breath work. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this." No, I like practiced, I went back to the basics, practice non-resistance, and with 40 in 48 hours, it was gone. But that's because my like how I referred to the subconscious habit before. It's because like I have that ingrained in me. Like my
mm,
body knows how to do that.
mm. Yeah, amazing. I think that's a super, super important point, right? Because a lot of people want to think the end goal is that they never have anxiety ever again, but that would actually mean that your body's survival system isn't on, it isn't working at all. And so while it might be inconvenient, it seems like a much healthier approach to be like, oh, cool, my system is still alive, it's still on, it's still trying to keep me safe. And I would assume, it's like the healthiest person isn't the person who sits in a chair all day. They're the person who goes and exercises and is mobile and experiences a certain level of stress within the body that is part of the body's hormonal cycle anyway, that it has to move through. And then they have a stronger body. I would imagine that it's, well, if somebody's having panic attacks every day, that might wear them out. I would imagine their ability to panic and then come back to their center probably makes them feel a lot stronger, more capable, not broken. They're like, oh, look, I can, instead of 90 days, you found yourself in 48 hours instead. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yes. And I see it all the time. And so some of my private students, uh, they're doing so well and it is incredible. But you're right. It's not the end goal isn't to completely eliminate anxiety. It's to change our relationship with it when it happens because we're all going to go through stressful times in our life where it is going to resurface. It just is. Like that's life, right? But there's no quick fix or any other fix other than non-resistance that needs to be done in the moment.
Mm, amazing. Yeah, I know we're coming up on time, so I just had
I was
one
say, what
other.
time is it, Brandon? Oh
It's
my
right.
goodness.
We're a little past. I just
Here
have
I was
one.
worried. What were we going to talk
Oh no, you have so much to talk about. I have one last question just because I'm very curious and it's kind of random and probably not a super long answer. But have you ever tried using the non-resistance method just for any unpleasant sensation or emotion that somebody's struggling with? And is that a doorway to freedom as a whole?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So like what I teach, right? Like the gateway into my world is truly anxiety. But once I healed, and I'll share my story because I think that's what's most relatable. Once I healed the panic and the anxiety, then I suffered with depression for years. And what got me out of it, it was truly non-resistant. It was like not labeling the emotions, detach, like I'm the observer of what's happening, the energetics, like because depression is
Hmm.
energy and stored negative emotion in your body, right? I did use a lot of breath work to get myself out of the depressive cycle. I haven't fallen back into that for like almost 3 years as well. But then once I healed the depression, it was all these like, yes, emotions, but like limiting beliefs of like, I've always been the girl like has never felt good enough. I've always been the girl who has thought that like success was like some far off thing where like I've never felt really confident in relationships. I've always really just I don't even know how to explain it. I've always just been this girl that just feels like there's like she's off or there's something wrong with her. And I know now that that's what I learned. So this is where I think some of the childhood stuff does come into play and limiting belief stuff. But I don't what has gotten me out of that is observing the thoughts and observing the behaviors of the not feeling good enough and knowing that they're just patterns and they're not. So that's like really barely touching the surface, but
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. If you're observing it, then you can't be it.
Yeah.
So you can identify with that voice if you're able to sit and watch it move through. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Something that I've just been noticing from having done, I posted on my Instagram recently my snapshot from Calendly. It always shows me how many sessions I do every year, and it was like 498 that I think were recorded on that Calendly. And I've been doing this at that rate basically since I was about 18 years old. Um, and what was I going to say? One of the things I've kind of dumbed it down to that I see in a lot of people is people are always either trying to move away from an unpleasant sensation or chasing something that they think is going to give them a pleasant sensation. And to the degree that they're in resistance or attachment to either side of that is where they're out of control, unsatisfied, not at peace within their life. And so being able to see it, not identify with it, not have resistance to it. And I would go even the next step is the thing that they're trying to chase, realizing that they already have the underlying quality of it within them. It brings a lot of peace. And then you don't have to resist, chase, you just got to be right where you are and let your world organize to that state of calm.
Yes. Oh, I got chills as you said that. I feel that so much in my heart. Like, yeah, we are so powerful. And I believe that we have like literally everything at our fingertips to heal anything a lot of the emotional dysfunction in our body. There's a really good book on what you're talking about right now. It's called The Power of Now by, I think that one's by Eckhart Tolle. Have you
Yeah.
ever?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that book, there's a lot of books that I share on my page that really, when it comes to like this being the observer, there's some really great books out there on that. And I teach it
Hmm.
all in that. There's the second part of my PDF called Rewired. There's did you get the update of that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
That
say on
second
there to
part's
not
great.
look at that for like a certain time, but
I cheated, of course.
I
Yeah.
know my students will come to me, they're like, is it okay? And I'm like, yeah, actually, I kind of partly want to take the 90 days out of there, but because I do think it is very useful information.
I could see the benefit of having it either way. My brain is just so anticipatory that I have to know what's
I
coming
gotta
next, so I
know.
can't let it go. I'm like, what is it? What is the thing?
I
Um,
gotta know. There's a secret thing that Lindsay's hiding for 90
yeah.
days.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing
Yes,
just this
or
wealth of information and experience and giving people a simple and clear path to being free from something that can be totally captivating and totally shut down someone's life. I mean, I'm a big believer that terror, just this absolute fear, is one of the fastest doorways to true and complete freedom because it's the most primal biological survival urge based on the separate self. And so when you can make your peace with it through this non resistance method, you've just sort of gone beyond your limited survival self and into your spiritual, immortal, infinite self, if you will. And so there's nothing that I hate more than that feeling of terror and fear. You know, when I'm going on a flight and all of a sudden it hits me and I have my anxiety diarrhea and I get to my location, I'm like, I feel like I just was in a civil war for 2 months straight. My whole system's fried and I'll never leave my house again, right? It's the thing that I hate the most, but on the other side of this practice that you're teaching everyone is true freedom, is a super direct path. And so I'm
and people
gonna,
don't always like it because it is so
no, no, no. It's ego shattering. It's hard.
it is. I say this a lot to my private students and just reiterating it for myself. That experience was one of like the biggest doorways to being like full transformation of who I am as a person.
Mm,
And it would have never happened if it wasn't for that panic and that,
mm,
yeah, exactly what you're saying.
amazing. Such a good reframe for just suffering or big life events as a whole, that they can
Yes,
also be our doorway to our biggest transformation.
absolutely.
Mm.
Hands down.
Amazing. Well, thanks again so much for being here and
Of
sharing
course.
this with everyone. They're gonna love it.
Yes,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, appreciate your time. So, obviously, what Lindsay is teaching is super important, super helpful stuff. And the more that I've been doing this work, even being on the side of this work that is sometimes very top-down approach, where we are finding conflict shocks, the things that turn on biological programs and symptoms, or we're going into memory work, internal family systems. We are going more into the when and why of it all. The more I've been doing it, the more that I see a need for just the non-resistant side. Or another way that I'll frame it to my clients is, okay, if there's a moment where the appropriate response or the survival response was this intense anxiety, when you feel into that, whether you know what the memory was or wasn't, what did that version of you need to communicate? And can you let that come out through that anxiety? Because sensations, emotions, biological responses are, in a way, the body's version of communication. It's trying to say something, it's trying to process a moment. And so, can you let it just speak? Can you let it just process? Can you see that anxiety coming out as what we call a healing phase, where it's dissipating without having any resistance to it, right? And then the other helpful question I sometimes guide clients to ask is, what did you need in that moment? What would have made that better? A sense of connection, a sense of a safe presence, a sense of reassurance, a sense of things will be okay. Feel into what that would be like to receive that. Or, in other words, can you be that for yourself? Right? Which is kind of what she's teaching. If you're in non-resistance, you're being that safe and calm presence onto yourself. If you're meeting it with loving, compassionate awareness, that might have been the parent you needed in that moment, whatever it is, and that can help to complete the story, right? So it's a really important integration tool. For me, I would say it's one part of my process. And it sounds like it's completely enough for people and that's all they need. And I am by no means the leading expert on anxiety, but just speaking now a little bit to the broader stroke of helping people with relationships, symptoms, painful patterns, this non-resistance piece is one tool that I'll use, one aspect of it. And for those of you that are more familiar with German New Medicine, anxiety or panic, it's oftentimes a frontal fear, some sort of danger that's out in front of you, paired with a sense of powerlessness, can't do anything about it. Really, it can be a frontal fear conflict plus one additional active conflict. So it could be a territorial fear, could be a separation, some say it could even be an indigestible morsel, a self-devaluation conflict. That could be the additional active conflict that's paired with frontal fear, right? And I would assert that that's potentially why people with anxiety have different responses as to how they navigate it or where it lands. Like for my example of the panic diarrhea, to further embarrass myself, let's say that's a frontal fear. I'm not going to have the bathroom. I'm going to be trapped, whatever, plus an indigestible morsel conflict. Ooh, it's indigestible for me to be in this frontal fear. I got to get it all out through the diarrhea, right? That would be like, oh, that's how your system copes with, deals with, mobilizes that anxiety. That's its specific survival response that it goes into. Whereas somebody else's, it might be a self devaluation. So now they think they're broken, they think there's something wrong with them. They're getting more of the pain, inflammation, brain fog, shutdown type symptoms afterwards, right? The frontal fear, plus whatever the secondary conflict is, creates the panic anxiety plus the additional symptoms in some form of specificity, which can all be tracked if you were to look at a non-contrast CT scan of your brain. You could see, oh, this is where it's lit up in my brain. That means it's frontal fear plus the powerlessness or plus the separation plus the self-devaluation conflict. And if all of these words sound like gibberish to you, check out learninggnm.com or my video on what German New Medicine is. And then a KCT, if you're abandonment, isolation, refugee conflict, can intensify all of those symptoms and make them more severe, right? And that's where somebody could think that they are going to die if they're having this panic. They're not, they're just in this biological adaptation. And GNM would say you find the conflict shock, the original moment. You find the subconscious reminders, the thing in your life that is reminding you of that moment. And by bringing the unconscious to the conscious, it can turn it off. By bringing the tracks to the conscious mind, it can turn it off. The somatic inquiry work that I teach, it goes a little bit deeper than that. It goes into the identity, the who do you become in that moment of anxiety, right? So maybe for me, who do I become when I'm in that moment is somebody who wants to take in something to feel safe. I want to ingest it to feel safe, right? I become somebody who's scared, shut down, doesn't want to connect. My identity is there's something wrong with me, shame, and I need to get out of the shameful situation. I need to clear it out of my system and intake something that makes me feel safe, right? So there's an identity that's in that. And so in the deeper inquiry work that I do, we get to that identity or the core context, what made that original conflict shock a conflict shock in the first place. And that's unique to everybody. Everybody's psyche is going to interpret that situation differently. Why was it dangerous? Why did it invoke that survival response? Right? So that's kind of the top down level to it. The non resistance or the meeting the sensation without resisting it or chasing a different sensation you want to feel instead, giving yourself what that part of you wanted, what that sensation needs is the remedy, or again, just the non resistance is the bottom up approach. Either can work, both together can work, both individually can work. You know, it's all different steps within the big picture of healing, right? And so you want to ask not how do I stop anxiety, but what identity or survival strategy did my body mobilize that made anxiety useful in the first place? What was I, who was I becoming, right? That required that. Yeah. So anyway, my conscious somatic rewire method, it aims to use both a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. Um, and it sounds like Lindsay does a bottom-down approach for starters, and then as she coaches people deeper, she starts to do some of the top-down stuff as well, like she described with how she was moving through depression, and in the advanced section of her course, the rewire and other things that she expands into, she gets into that too. But she first starts with the bottom-up approach, which for a lot of people, especially if they're neurodivergent or there's somebody who gets a little too deep into the trying to figure it out and solving it in a way that reminds their lizard brain that the danger is still real, it makes a ton of sense why they might want to do her method first and primarily. You know, just like she said, she has people do her process for 90 days before they get into the expanded stuff. That makes a lot of sense for a lot of people, right? That's going to be an easier way to uh, be comfortable enough within yourself to be able to go to those deeper places, those memories, those identities, all of that, right? You got to be able to be regulated in the first place. Otherwise, you're going to start to go into those memories and then you're going to hit a healing phase. You're going to have some anxiety come up and there's going to be so much resistance to it that you just want to search for a different memory, a different solution. You just complicate it. You'll miss the mark, to say it bluntly. So that's why I was super excited to have Lindsay on. I think this is really amazing work that she's doing. Again, I see on a daily basis all the people that report back to her their big wins. So I think that is really cool and something that I will definitely utilize within my own practice. So again, you don't heal anxiety by defeating it. You heal it by no longer orienting or organizing your life around it, right? That's kind of like in my inquiry process when we get into this thing called who would I be without it? What would I feel like? What would life look like? How would I move forward if this anxiety wasn't there? And can you do that? Right? Because your nervous system or your subconscious mind, it doesn't believe thoughts, insights, and awareness alone. It believes action because action reinforms what you actually believe, what's actually going on, what's really there. So it's through that non resistance and doing the thing anyway that's going to get you really good results when you're in this type of cycle, from what I can see so far. I hope to have on a couple other people that will speak to the way that they process fear, panic, anxiety with people as well. And I plan to expand into how this relates to mast cell activation and what I'm starting to see is the path to healing that quote unquote autoimmune condition. So thanks for listening. Hope you found some value. And I will link Lindsay's Instagram, her PDF, working with her. All of that will be in the show notes. So feel free to check it out. Thanks again. Talk to you guys later.